This is Senior Memories, featuring stories about your history, your community, your family. Join us as we remember.
When I was a little girl in the 1950s, early 60s, and I lived in Canonsburg on Orchard Avenue, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. I only lived 5 houses up the street from her. And many times when I would be bratty and get angry at my mother, I would run away to my grandmother's house. Now, my mother was very cooperative about this. She would call my grandmother, tell her I was coming, and my mother would stand at the bottom of our steps and watch me walk down the street with my little blue suitcase, and my grandmother would greet me at the end of the street to make sure that I got there safely. Now, if I was lucky, it was bread making day. All right, oftentimes what triggers these memories are sounds. And one of the sounds I remember was the sound of the wooden spoon gently hitting the side of this metal pot that my grandmother used to dissolve her yeast. And this is the pot she used, and I have it hanging in my kitchen as a decoration and as a memory. Then the next sound I remember was after she dissolved the yeast, she would start to make the dough, and she would use the sifter to mix the flour and all of the other ingredients to form her big dough ball. And she had a big bowl that she put the dough in to rise, and she'd cover it with a tea towel. Well, since I was there most of the day, one of my pleasures was to sneak into the kitchen and lift the tea towel and pinch out the dough, because I liked to eat raw dough. And my grandmother, whom we called Mum, never got angry, but as she would come to check to see how the dough was doing, and she would find pinch marks all over the dough, and she would just say to me, you know, Laurie, you're going to choke on that, or that's going to sit in your stomach like a rock. And I do believe there was a time that I did choke on it, but obviously I survived. So then later on in the day would be time to make the bread, and I can remember her taking the dough and putting it down on the kitchen table and starting to knead it and punch it and roll it around, and she would give me a big chunk of it. And I would sit there and pull and knead and punch it just like she did. And then she would give me a small loaf pan, which today would be the same as a banana bread loaf pan. But I got to make my own mini kid size loaf of bread. And to me, that was just the greatest, because I always liked little miniature things anyway. So to have this little tiny bread that would come out about this big was just a thrill for me. All right, so now the bread is done. When we were growing up, we were not allowed to drink coffee, but we could dunk anything in the world in it that we wanted to. And this is when my mom introduced us to coffee bread, which later on I've discovered is probably a food that they ate during the Depression because of money being short. But coffee bread was simply taking a piece of bread, putting it on a plate, soaking it in coffee, and putting butter on it. And it worked best, though, if you had the crust. And there was often more kids, grandchildren around, than crust. So as soon as the bread would come out of the oven, then it would be, I get a crust, I get a crust. We would start bickering as to who would get the crust. So it was just a nice memory that we had, and I guess even though I don't bake bread, I still dunk my toast in my coffee.
Senior Memories. Remembering the times of our lives.